Okay, good morning, guys. Sifu Tarbell here, Wuxia martial arts. So today we'll be starting a new series. We'll be taking a look at the high level, right? So in Wing Chun, we have three different levels. We have the high level, which is usually around upper chest to the top of your head. And then you have mid-level, which is typically top of your chest, right, down to about the dantian or slightly below the belly button. And then you have the low level, which is from about the navel to the groin, right? So this is typically where the hands can reach. So the lowest part of the low level is down by the fingertips, right here. Mid-level is typically anything that we're doing, right, in the Sun and Tao that gets us going here, or in the Chun Q that's dealing with this mid-level. But then the high level, right, is typically if we're like punching somebody who's a lot taller than us, because obviously people are built differently, and when you go in, for us training personally in the Sun and Tao and the Chun Q, we always use our body's mid-level as a measure of everything that we're doing. For the most part, there are some techniques where we'll go a little bit higher or something, but for the most part, Wing Chun uses your own body structure in the mid-level to determine good structure, right? But in actual fighting, when I'm going forward, sometimes I have to adjust my fighting center line. So what is the fighting center line? Right? So the fighting center line is the concept that when you have two people who are going to fight or match up, right, that typically you'll draw the center line from about your solar plexus, right, straight. So for example, this would be like from my center line where I would be punching, right? And this could be a little bit higher to the throat or something like that. Now, if I was fighting somebody shorter, right, their fighting center line would have to come up to me and I would have to go down to them. This is where I want to be able to hit them, so I would go down a little bit. If somebody was maybe the same height as me, right, it would be pretty much on a straight line, right, and on similar length and height, right? Now from here, if I had somebody that's really, really tall, right, I would have to go a little bit higher like that, right? If they're really, really tall, right, then I don't know, you should probably like try to run away if you can. Always try to run away. But if you have to fight, of course, then you have to fight. But yeah, the idea that fighting center line is always predicated upon the idea that my center line, where I want to go, right, is going to line up with the height of this person, okay? So for the high level, right, typically a lot of the Wing Chuns, like a Bong Sao or a Tun Sao, they don't work, right? They don't work at that high level when you're fighting somebody high, because the structure breaks down. So in the mid-level, these structures are fantastic, right? Using all of this, right, works perfectly, right? It's beautiful. But like I said, when you fight somebody high level, the Bong Sao is not something that you want to be taking a lot of pressure, because it's going to hurt your shoulder. Same thing with the Tun Sao, like, right? This is not a very strong structure. So for the high level, typically what we do, we have a good rule of thumb is that we're going to punch, always punching, and that the hands will typically never open, right? So everything you do, right, to the high level is going to stay as a punch, and the arm will move slightly, right? But it's going to continue to be a punch, okay? So that's the thing to think about. So let's get started. All right, so today what we're going to do is we'll go from here, all right? And I'm going to have my punching hand back, right, just like this. Now, I'm going to step in with shin though, and I'm going to punch off the backhand, just like that. All right, so that's first. So here, a couple times, punching off the backhand. The punch leads, and then the body follows. All right, try to make sure that your body is nice and straight. So in, just like that. All right, and again, punching off the backhand, my right hand, punch, and I step with the right foot, and the left foot drags up behind. Here, good character two. Right, punching with the right hand, stepping, and then the left foot drags up behind. All right, let's switch. So now my left hand is behind. All right, I go from here, I punch with the left, I step with the left, and the right foot drags up behind. Now, the reason you want that back foot dragging up is twofold. One is that it helps me, right, to get power, right? So when I go here, it gives me the power, right, into the punch. All right, second, it helps me to advance forward, obviously with my mobility when I'm going in. But third, defensively, it's going to put all the weight on the back leg, right? So if I'm stepping in and I'm kind of like, you know, I have double weight. Double weight means that there's weight on both legs, right? And I step in very aggressive, but the guy sweeps or the guy comes in and kicks, right? I don't have a chance to lift this up and use it in a Wing Chun fashion. So either the limb gets destroyed or it gets swept to the ground or something like that. All right, so from here, the left hand punches, the left foot steps, all right, right foot drags up behind, pull in my hip, and I tuck, right? See how I tuck my tail down, and I stay nice and straight like this. Okay, so for today, what we're gonna do is all punches will go a little bit higher. So I go back to the right hand, right? I'm gonna punch and step in, and now you see, this one goes nice and high. And when I do this, all right, both fists are facing upwards like that, all right? So it's not that this one's like here and this one's here. It's not turned. Both of them are straight, just like if you had two swords or if you had a gun, right? You don't want to have one gun facing this way and one gun facing that way, or the swords. You want everything facing forward if that's where your opponent is, all right? So same with your fists. So right fist is back. I step in, all right? And it goes a little bit higher here, all right? And then I go back. Now the left hand is back. So I step with the left, I punch with the left, just like that. And then I go back. Right hand is back. I punch with the right, step with the right, come back. And the left. Okay, all right, so now we talk about the idea of, well, what can happen from here? So remember, for the Wing Chun person, our goal is to get in as quickly as possible, right? We never want to stay out here with this guy, you know, throwing technique and you're like trying to dodge or catch it or something, because eventually he'll fake and throw something and catch you, right? It's a game. So the Wing Chun person, our rationale is to get in as quickly as possible and kind of like stuff them, right? So they're trying to keep this range and do all these things, and we just want to get in and close them down so that we can implement this close quarter game, clinch them up, hit them, do all that. This is where we feel safe, right? So in this regard, what we're going to think about is if the person has their lead hand forward, right, like this, I'm going to try to have my lead hand be the one that punches in, right? So I'm literally going to punch right in, right? And then we'll end up crossed like this, okay? So we call this a closed door fighting strategy, right? So if the person is here, right, and their lead hand is forward, when I punch, we should end up crossed like this. So I'm not trying to punch and end up on the inside, right? I'm just trying to punch. Now, if they're doing one of these kind of Tong Po, like blood sport, Muay Thai things like this, right? When we go in, we just punch the face right away, right? But if they're like nice and tight and you step in and punch, right, then you're gonna end up making this cross like that, okay? And for the Wing Chun people, you can both start. If you have a partner at home, you both start, all right? And then you both step in and punch, and then at the end, you'll be crossed like this, right? So their arm will cross and your arm will cross. And when you do this, you don't wanna try to push through or punch or give any type of trigger at first, okay? So from here, I step in and punch, like that, okay? And one more time, and we'll go a little bit higher with this one. So I go like that, just a little bit higher. And then remember, so now you're gonna be crossed like this, right? So their arm is forward and your arm is forward and you're in this closed door cross position. So we have a couple of options of what we can do when we step in and we end up crossed, okay? So the first option is when I go in and I punch like this, right, is that their pressure, right, pushes me up a little bit like that. Or maybe even they just like push me up like this to knock me back, right? So, so from here, when I step in, right, when they push up like this, I'm gonna let this one come under and punch just like that. And this comes right out of the end of the Chung Q form. Remember, after we kick, right, and we go 1, 2, 3, and we're doing all of this, right? And I go boom, boom. See that? So here, and this comes under, okay? So from here, my right foot steps in, my right foot punches, but now they lift it up a little bit too high, right? So I punch under. Let's try this again. All right, so right foot steps in, right punch, they lift up, right? And I go. And now this is important, is that I don't want to punch and leave this hand out here, is that as soon as it gets lifted up, I allow this one to replace, and then this comes back, and it's facing forward, so that as soon as I go here, I'm able to punch again right away, all right? So this is a punching methodology for the high level defense, right? So you wanna think, I always wanna go forward. So when I punch in and they lift, I go boom, and then I wanna continue to go forward, right? Okay, so let's try this a few times. So I go right punch and the right foot steps in, they lift up, I punch under with the left hand, like that, right? And I go back. Right, here we are, right fist is back, I step in and punch, I punch under, right, and then I go back. Right fist is back. I'm gonna punch with the right, step in with the right, they lift up, punch under, right? And remember, they're a little bit taller, so when you're punching under, and I'll go from the side here. So I step in with the right punch, so they lift this up. As soon as they lift it up, this one is exposed, you see? Remember what we say in Wing Chun, when the path is clear, we go forward. So I go, all right, and then I go back. So I step in with the right foot, punch with the right hand, they lift it up. And by lift it up, it could be that they like physically grab it or they like knock it out of the way. Maybe they're trying to like change levels or something. That's something different when they change the low level. But the idea is that both of you made contact, right? And then they pushed, right? They pushed. Either maybe they were trying to jab and the energy started to like neutralize in an upward fashion, you know, or they just like freaked out and lifted up like, you know, maybe in a karate fashion or like a taekwondo fashion or some of those things, right? So for Wing Chun, remember, others walk the bow, meaning they're trying to do everything that's curved and round and kind of big. And Wing Chun's simplicity, right, is that we just want to go forward no matter what. We're like a stubborn child, right? We just want to go forward. So I step in, boom, and they lift up and I go, I say, that's where I want it to be, okay? So this is number one, right? Number one. So let's take a look at the second option, right? Now the second option is that I step in with the right foot and I punch with the right hand. All right, but now, right, I feel that this guy, his punch is a little bit low, like that. So maybe his punch is coming in, but it's a little bit lower. Now, in the previous weeks, we talked about how we could do a jump style and like do all of this stuff. And that's all fine and good for the mid-level, but for the high level, I mean, you don't want to start trying to do a jump style because this looks kind of goofy and it doesn't really serve too much purpose. If it's mid-level, it's beautiful because I can stick to the guy, right? There's a little bit of my ability to listen and adhere to be able to stick to him in the mid-level. But in the high level, I don't really have that. The structure is already, you know, kind of disengaged, right? Structurally, I'm strong here, this way, but the further I go away from my body, the weaker my structure becomes, right? We always have to remember that in the Southern Chinese styles, the Hokkien styles, right? Like Wing Chun and White Crane and all of these styles, keeping the elbows in, below, short stance, all of this stuff, right? Whether it's the praying mantis or whatever style you were doing, the snake, right? All the styles were predicated on the idea that the elbows would be in because you had good structure, right? And it's close quarters combat. The further out I start going, so when I get into like a long fist type of thing or like something like that, or like, you know, one of these longer styles, it's a different structure. It's not wrong, it's not right, but it's not Wing Chun, right? So for us, when we go forward, the structure has been broken like that, right? But now as I go forward this and I go to punch high, I feel that this guy, right, is a little bit low and that the path is clear. So I just punch in like that, right? And then you'll feel this, right? You'll feel when you cross up that there's really nothing there to catch and you're just gonna keep the elbow low, and punch, right? So I go from here, I step in and punch, right? And it's a high level punch, right? But he starts to slide a little bit under. So I'm gonna sink my elbow and go forward at the same time. And I'm gonna show that from the side. So I go in, high, but now as it starts to slide, I sink my elbow and go forward at the same time. And this is really like that short range power, right? So it's not that I'm gonna wind up on this thing. So I step in to go high. And now as it's a little bit low, I go like that. You see it's short range from here. So the idea is that I was going, right, to match the fighting center line, but this is a little low. So to cover my base, I sink my elbow, see that? On top of his arm, I sink my elbow and then control, and punch. So actually I'm trapping him at the same time. So I go forward and then like that, and I trap his arm under my punch because the elbow stays low. All right, now the only reason I would be doing this is because the guy, you know, remember he's taller than me, right? But now when I punch in and we meet, is that maybe he's a little bit lower like this, maybe his hands were down or something like that, but my punch still catches, but it's not enough to stop me, okay? So from here, I go in and then like that, and I punch low. Go in, I feel a little bit that I can go forward, and I sink the elbow in, and I fire. Okay, remember, 2 options, right? So we'll wrap it up here. 2 options. One is I go forward, and he pushes my arm up. So the pressure goes up, and I let this other punch replace, and then this one comes back like that. All right, so that's option 1. I punch in, pressure goes up, I punch under. All right, option 2 is I punch in, and now I feel like the structure is not really there for him, and I go bang, like that. Of course, at home, you can always add some follow-up punches as well. You can go in for the first one, it gets lifted, and go boom, like that. You can go in with the second one, where I go forward, I go bang. Now, the nice thing between the 2 options there, option 1 and option 2, is the energy for the punching is different, right? So when I go forward here, and he lifts me up, I'm punching off of the backhand, right? So he lifts up, and I got all this power, I go boom, like that, and then I punch. On the second option, right, as I go forward and I meet him, but I feel the structure is weak on his part, I punch off the front hand, I go crack. So you have 2 different types of energy, right? The first option is really good for the beginners. It gives you like this big movement. So when I go here and I get lifted up, I got all this. You see that? Boom. I got a nice long line of power and attack. But on the second one, right, it's short. I don't have that long line, right? So as I went forward, I go like that. You see? I go forward and then in. 2 different types of energy, right? 2 different types of principles, right? So if he is going high, right, then I have to punch under, just like the end of the chunk cue. Remember, I go here at the end, and then I punch under, all right? And then look, the second one, I sink down, and then I punch over, right? So for this particular drill, what we did is we wanted to keep things simultaneous, right? So when I stepped in, the first option is as he lifts, I just punch. Very, very simple, right? For the second option, when I went in, I just punched like that. But it's not to say that you couldn't go forward, and as you felt it slipping, that you couldn't jut and then punch, because we have that at the end of the chunk cue as well. When I go bouncing punch, I punch under, then I sink down, and I punch like that. So I'd say play around with both options, but the timing is definitely better if you can go forward, and then you can just punch over his structure and seal his arm in a little bit, okay? So that is part 1 of the high-level defense punching methodology. And remember, don't get caught up in the shape of the hand, right? Everybody, you know, the beauty of Wing Chun resides in all the structures and like all these kind of fancy hands, and that stuff works, don't get me wrong, I'm not against it. You know, but when you're really sparring and you're really fighting, and even you have boxing gloves on or something, it's hard. It's hard to be able to like make the shape of the hand and do all of these things. It's much more well equipped for like chisao and clinching and all of those things, dealing with different types of Wing Chun attacks. But when we're talking about just going forward and fighting as it is, right? And I have like just fists, all of this stuff. You know, being able to go under, being able to go around, use your footwork and continue to punch. In my opinion, that's like, for beginning and intermediate level, that's the heart of Wing Chun, is being a good puncher, right? A lot of people forget the idea that Wing Chun actually is Wing Chun Kun, and Kun in Chinese is like fist or boxing method. You know, the beautiful springtime boxing method, or praise springtime boxing method. So when we look at that, don't get caught up in the hands so much, right? Think about if you really wanted to go forward with the Lin Wan Kun, the chain punching, and something got in your way, how would you move around that and continue to punch, right? Without using the hand. Because sometimes if you train the shape of the hand too much, then when you start to go forward and you get somebody who's taller than you, and you try to do like a Tun Sao, or you try to do like a Bong Sao because you've trained Chi Sao too much, but you haven't punched enough. Then you find out that your structure is quite weak, and he can just like knock you back or take you down or do something. So I speak to you from a wealth of sparring failures and experience with high-level people, and eventually learning like what works and what didn't work. You know, so please trust me on this, work on this material, and yeah, and next week we'll take a look at part 2, also dealing with different energies of when they try to push me out side to side, and some of those things. Okay, so Have a good week, guys. Try to enjoy that snow.